Yeah, I think not necessarily mistakes, but mistakes happen, obviously, and I people are afraid to fail, and it's really interesting. I was having a really deep conversation with my daughter the other day, and I asked her. I said, "What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail at anything?" And she said, "I wouldn't get very far."
Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, and welcome to the Money and You Show. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host, and we have a fantastic show today. We're going to be talking a lot about my favorite topic, your relationship with money, and many other practical aspects of the financial world and your own financial well-being. So I have a super amazing, talented guest on today. I cannot wait to bring her on. We had a very fun pre-show call, and I just thought she is going to be so interesting and informative and helpful to my audience. So thank you for listening today. Stick with us. I'm going to introduce you to Abbe Large. Abbe, she's a CLTC and the managing director at Lenox Advisors, a dedicated professional whose drive is to put her clients' best interests first. With nearly 30 years of experience, she's highly skilled in a variety of financial services, estate planning, and asset management solutions. With her corporate clients, she helps structure strategic employee benefits as well as executive carve-out programs. Abbe is a passionate advocate for families and individuals dealing with difficult financial realities. She's personally navigated these same financial complexities when caring for her father through his battle with pancreatic cancer. Abbe faced the same challenges she regularly helps others overcome, and gained a unique appreciation for the importance of being supported through these challenging times with grace and dignity. She believes that when money is removed from the equation, people can focus on what truly matters, love and family. Abbe's insightful empathy has made her a valuable resource to her clients in their times of need. She was named on Forbes' top financial security professionals in both 23 and 22. Prior to Lenox, she spent 11 years at Cowen Financial Group and studied journalism at Ohio State University's Scripps School of Journalism. In her free time, Abbe loves participating in outdoor activities such as paddleboarding, boating, and skiing, while also investing in her own health through good nutrition and exercise. Above all else, she values spending time with her husband and 3 children and pup. With an unwavering commitment to both her profession and community alike, Abbe shines as an endlessly passionate individual who continually works toward achieving greatness every day. Welcome, Abbe.
Thank you. It's really fun to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. And there's a little bit of a theme going today. It's really interesting. I had a very long call with my trust attorney about some things this morning. Then I had somebody talking about long-term care insurance, and now you. So we've got, kind of an interesting bunch of tied-in topics going on in my life today. So thank you. There's so much that we can talk about. You have so much experience, for one thing. And what is your favorite part of what you do, if you can choose one or two?
My favorite part. Wow. That's a really good question.
I gave you no warning, by the way.
No one's ever answered. No one's ever really asked that of me.
I don't typically ask. I don't know why. It's just when somebody has as much experience as you, I kind of want to know.
You're right. But you're right. Like, it's so interesting. There are so many little facets of what I do that I love, but I think what I love the most, and this is pretty dramatic. This is right out of the gate dramatic. I had a client pass away recently, and I knew him for 25 years. And his wife called me, and it was the first time I've ever heard her voice. It was a long distance, he was in another state. So I didn't get to really meet his wife. I only had the relationship with him, which put a little pin in that because I learned something from this story, this instance. she called me hysterical crying and said, my husband just died. And he told me if anything happened to him to call you. And he made me remember your cell phone number. And she's hysterical crying. And so I really just wrapped my whole being around her, and I tried to empower her. She had no idea where things were. She didn't know who to call. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how she was going to live. They had 9 children.
Wow.
4 of which she had to put already through college. It was serious. It was something that, I mean, it was to the core. Wow, this woman like needs me. This woman memorized my number. And I never, and so here's my takeaway from that. I loved that because I was able to empower her to take control of her life and not feel so defeated. But my lesson in that was I will never go again without meeting the significant other of the family. I will never do it. It just goes against every ounce of my core, because I could have changed that. It took that for me to realize this is not okay, that this woman feels this way. It's not okay that most women don't understand their own finances. It's not okay that the husband makes a decision for them and says, no, they're not interested. They don't need to be involved. That is a crock of bull. It is true. They want to know. They want to know what their life is going to be like. They want to know what's going to happen should something happen to their spouse. Don't tell me that they're not interested. They want to know. They might not want to get in the weeds, but I need to know that they know who I am. They know who to call. They know where things are, and they know how much money they're going to have. Like, they need to know at least that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, the answer to the question is I loved that I had that relationship with the husband, right? For him to feel that way about me, to have his wife have me as her first phone call. That was huge for me, but nonetheless a lesson on what I could do better. So I think the part 2 of that question is I love that I have a 30-year career and I'm still learning and I'm still advancing and you can never not learn to be better, right?
Yeah.
To be better for others and to be better for yourself. So those are the things that I love. I love when I meet with a family. In fact, I met with a couple who found me through the podcasting.
Oh, wow.
She had never listened to a podcast before. She listened to mine and she said I sounded authentic. So she called, she Googled me, obviously made sure I wasn't a crazy person. And they're a wonderful, wonderful couple. And they do make a lot of money. They don't know what to do with it. They're not used to, they just spend. They know that they should be saving. They know that they need to be more responsible. And when they met with me, it was this wonderful interaction of, I need help and I know that you can help me. And to walk away from that meeting knowing that I'm helping them and I'm helping the next generation of their family lead a more fiscally responsible life, that makes me feel really good. So I guess that's the answer to those questions.
I love it. I love that. I like the question. Now I'm going to ask you more.
Good question.
The thing you said about always learning, that was always a criteria for me. Whatever I was doing, whether it was a hobby or a career idea, whatever. Yeah, that just keeps it alive. I mean, it keeps you alive. It's such a great feeling to know that no matter how much you learn, there's always more and you can always get better. I love that you brought that up because I think that is one of the key things to look for in a career, actually.
I think not necessarily mistakes, but mistakes happen, obviously. And people are afraid to fail. And it's really interesting I said, I was having a really deep conversation with my daughter the other day, and I asked her, I said, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail at anything? And she said, I wouldn't get very far. God, what an answer.
Yeah, very interesting.
It was a good answer.
Yeah.
So I love to learn. I love to get better. And I find that this career allows that on a daily basis, if you let it.
Yeah. And, as far as the woman who called you, it really highlights the significant role a financial advisor can play in a family's life. And I think sometimes people overlook that, or they don't actually incorporate them into their lives as much as they could. Different things are changing in their lives, and, they don't necessarily call that advisor and keep them informed. And so, a person like you can play a really key role in someone's life, and obviously their, the growth of their net worth and their wealth and everything else, but should be thought of as a person to lean on in changing times, whatever they might be. So, and I especially love what you were saying about empowering women. I don't know what percentage it is, but in your world, is it mostly men? I have a funny story, because in my world, I'm the financial person in my house. So I'm the one having to drag my husband to any meeting, saying, you have to know something. Like, you can't just walk around leaning on me and knowing nothing about our taxes, our investments, or whatever. So, but I don't think that's the norm. And I think for the most part, women are, I don't even know if they're left out. And I loved what you were saying about them opting out because they think they aren't interested enough or don't need to know. I think a lot of that is more about a lack of confidence and a sense that, well, I won't understand it anyway, or I don't really get what they're talking about, so I'll just sit with this one out. What are some of your thoughts on this?
That's interesting that you said that. I remember before COVID, when we were belly to belly, face to face, right? And that's the way it rolled. And you could tell a lot about body language. Body language gives a lot away. I think even in Zoom it does too. But when you're with someone and you can see the uncomfortableness, you could feel the uncomfortableness. I don't ignore that. In fact, it's interesting that you said that, because the woman that called me from the podcast, she's the one that handles all the finances. Mm-hmm. He does not, but I said, I have to have a meeting with the two of you. That was my discovery call, the fact find. And he was there, and you could tell he had no interest whatsoever, but it was funny. I asked him one question. The first question I asked was, what was your relationship with money growing up with your parents? And he talked for a good 20 minutes. And that was probably the most he's chatted in a long time, but he started talking about all this, and he started saying things that she didn't even know, and it was interesting. But when you're in front of people, you could see the other person not being interested. You can tell when someone's not interested in what you're saying, and I don't think that should be ignored, because they're either confused, they don't understand, and I have a rule. If people don't understand, they're not going to buy. Mm-hmm. They're not going to agree. They just, they'll just blow it off. And so I think it's really important to make sure that you're taking time, that you're involving each person in the conversation, together and individually, and just to dig very deep in terms of how they feel. And I it was just interesting what you said to me about your husband not being interested. It's okay not to be interested. It's quite another not to know. It's very different.
I totally agree. And
right? I'm interested in this new generator that I would like to get, but I have no interest in the electrician and all this other stuff. I leave it to my husband, right? but I get it. We're getting a new generator. This is how much it costs, and this is what it does. But I don't need to get into the weeds.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, and they do need to know. They need to know for so many reasons, and you need them to know because, again, you could have a problem like your client did and pass away or get sick or whatever, but things can also turn. You can get into situations where you're trying to make big decisions together and you're not agreeing or whatever. And a lot of that comes from just not really engaging together on the financial aspects of your life and not even understanding them in the same way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a client review a couple weeks ago, and again, it was a relationship that I had with the husband. And you said it before. I'm in a man's industry. I mean, there were very, very few women when I first started. I was one of the only women in the company that had any success. So it was a lot of face-to-face with the husband, right? Mm-hmm. And I would be very, very careful when I did meet their wives or their significant others to, or ask this question, which is, does your wife work outside the home? Now with COVID, you have to change a little bit. Does your wife earn a living? Does she earn a living outside of the home? And so it's you can't say, does your wife work? Right? It's such an insult. Yes, she works. She works her butt off. Yeah. You have any idea what she's doing during the day? It's not easy. I went to work just so I could get people to listen to me, for God's sake. I mean,
yeah.
But anyway, I was having this call with them, and I had met the wife for the first time. She wasn't interested in meeting me. But I sensed a trend with my client in terms of how he was spending money and what he wanted to buy. And so I said, why don't we have a full fact find with your wife? And when I met her, I sensed that they had two totally separate ideas of saving and retirement and what they had and what they needed to do. And I learned that he's a spender and she's a saver. And so I needed to rein that in. I couldn't just go with what he wanted to do.
Right.
I had to balance it out with what she wanted to do and what he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that successfully is to listen. Ask questions and shut up. Mm-hmm. Listen. Mm-hmm. Because so many people, when they're in front of other people, they just and they talk about, look how much I know and look at this product and that, and just like, who cares? And I said this earlier, and I've said it often. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw this woman I saw that sense of panic in her. I don't know. I just picked up on it. My EQ is very high. And I said, time out. Let's start over. We need to back up. We need to get all the details, every single thing. And because he never wanted to do that. And I said, no, we're going to do that. And it made her so happy.
Yeah.
It made her so happy. She was like, finally, somebody sees me. Somebody understands what I want. And it turned the whole thing around. It was really interesting.
I really love that.
Yeah. Right? Like he's wrapped around her finger. Mm-hmm. And I see that.
Yeah.
But he wants so badly to do this and buy this and do that. I'm like, no, time out. We're not doing this. Let's do it together. Let's do it logically. Let's do it fiscally responsibly. And let's do it openly. And so I don't think a lot of people take that time to pick up on those cues. And it's really important to pick up on them.
Thank you for that. That's a great example of how emotional, your finances are for you in your life. And, that's the whole tie-in with your relationship with money is, what triggers you? What do you feel about spending versus savings and all kinds of things. And I think having somebody like you in the room makes all the difference in the world, especially if you're interested in sort of giving them equal time and hearing what both people are saying. It's almost like a financial therapy situation. I mean, I know that's not who you are, but it, there are so many aspects of business and finance where if people do take that time, I remember sitting with a real estate agent who was basically having a therapy session with us around, these issues with a house. And it happens. People have these differing ideas. And so when an advisor in whatever capacity has that EQ and can listen and can give the sense of, I'm on both your sides, let's get to a reasonable kind of decision or compromise or whatever it is, that is enormously helpful.
I think so.
It would be very tough to continue through life feeling like you were just at the mercy of somebody spending on whatever they wanted and you really had no say. I mean, that's a tough... that will turn you off to finance. That'll make you just say, I don't want to know about money. I don't want to even, it doesn't, it's not going to help me anyway. So why bother?
I think of a financial advisor. I mean, if you think of your doctors, for example, right? I can't imagine not having a relationship with my primary physician. My gynecologist, my OB, whatever, all these, my dentist, all these doctors in your life, and how they're not speaking to each other. I make sure that my doctors speak to each other about me. It's the same thing, right? Like, you have to speak to the CPA. You have to speak to their trust and estate attorneys. You need to speak to their investment advisor if they're working with somebody different. It's just, I'm the quarterback, right? And I'm the one that's trying to navigate the relationship so that I'm bringing something to the table, right? Because I'll give you a silly example. I can't tell you how many times people get the beneficiary designation wrong, or it's incorrect or outdated or whatever. I can't tell you how many times that happens. And I don't think that people are really asking these questions. That's just this very small example, but
that's a great example.
My goal is to build relationships that matter. It's not, I'm not out there trying to sell a product just to line my pocket. That is not an interest to me at all. The interest to me is getting under the hood, making an impact financially, emotionally, with regard to habits that have been formed and how to develop better habits, how to communicate better. This is a communicating world. This is a communicating business. I mean, you have to communicate. You can't just shove stuff and ideas down people's throats and expect them to it's just not, it's not good practice. Good practice is getting to know your clients, getting them to understand what you're saying. If they don't understand what you're saying, you got to dummy it down. You got to make sure they understand, because no one's going to buy anything if they don't understand. They just won't. They'll blow you off. They'll ghost you. Goodbye. I don't understand a word that person's saying. So it's really important to pick up on those cues of confusion, of I don't understand that. Could you repeat that? Because no one's going to say, I don't understand, because they feel stupid. And no one wants to feel stupid. So I'll always say, did I explain that right? Do you want me to explain that again? I don't think I did a good job explaining it the first time. I always blame myself, because then I'm like, yeah, could you please? Like, you didn't explain. And so I'll understand, like, okay, I need to just make it easier. I can't be in the weeds. I have to come out. And I just think it's about reading your clients, reading the relationship that they have, understanding the relationship that they have with money, which is, to your point, and the whole reason you're doing these podcasts, is money is an extremely emotional thing. And it is a thing, but it's not, because it can dictate behavior. Mm-hmm. And so it's extremely important to understand, to have my clients understand their relationship with money, not just for me to understand it, but for them to understand it. And what's interesting is that when you ask the question in front of the significant other, they're probably saying things that they've never heard before. So you're right. It is sort of a therapy session in a way, because I do think money and finances are emotional. It's what drives the markets, for God's sake.
Yeah.
It's all emotion. And so I think that is the primary driver of any good relationship that matters, is to understand people and talk about the things that can give them a path towards something better.
Yeah, it's so good. And, I think in the old days it was different, and maybe that was when mostly men ruled the industry. But, it was definitely like, what are your goals? Here's the path. And then you would go home and you go, I can't do that. I can't save that much. I can't, whatever. So it was kind of silly. Now, I think people are getting to know their clients a little better, but you're the first financial advisor I've talked to who has actually asked the question, what is your relationship with money, with those words? Some people will be like, what's your money personality or whatever, but this relationship, and I love what you're saying, because you're right. Your partner is probably, they've never asked that question, and they've never heard some of the stories that their partner has around growing up in their household and what the money conversations were, and how, you can pretty much guess that the spender and the saver, who are, one saves easily, one spends easily, there's a relationship there that is very different with money, and it's coming from their background.
Childhood.
Yeah, for sure.
Childhood.
So when you ask that question, what are you after, and how does that sort of help you navigate your work?
Just an understanding. And I'll give you an example. I asked the couple that question, and the wife said, well, growing up, we were wealthy, like private plane wealthy, and they lost it all. So she is very risk averse, very. Husband did not have this experience, had a fairly normal childhood, normal allowances, money, didn't have this trauma. So I had to understand her feelings before, and his feelings, and about money, so that I could explain these products better.
Yeah.
Understand what her needs were, what his needs were, not just fiscally, but emotionally. And it was interesting, in this particular case, at the end, she actually said, we knew that you were the person to work with because you picked a product that fits us both.
Nice.
So it's important because these products change lives.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that these products are there when they need them the most, but it's really important to get it right. It's like prescribing medication, right? You would never, back to the doctor example, you would never trust a doctor that just pushed pills on you. You would trust a doctor that took a real fact find, that got under the hood with you, not necessarily just physically, but emotionally too. Mm-hmm. And I think that my primary care physician, for example, asked me about my relationship with my parents growing up, asked me all these things about relationships growing up and how I am now and my relationships now, because relationships affect you. The stress of those relationships, whether it's a toxic relationship, a healthy relationship, whatever, you have to understand the relationships between the two people in order to fit the right product with them, or else they're just not going to buy it. Right. It's not going to fit for them. It might fit for one person, but not the other. But you need to make sure that you're understanding both. So, because there's a plethora of products out there, but you got to find the right one. And that's really important. And I think a lot of people miss that boat when they're advising. And I don't mean to, bash anybody about their careers, but it's really, 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 really important to understand. I don't get how people can move forward with anything if they don't understand. Mm-hmm. It drove my parents crazy growing up, by the way. They would always say no. I'd say, why? because I said so. I'm like, but that's not an answer. I need to know why. Well, why do you need to know why? Because that's not an answer. Just tell me why. I just need to understand.
I love that. I always need to know why too. It does drive a few people crazy. But that I can see. I feel like when we're growing up, and then we get to a point where we either want to replicate what we saw growing up, or we want to do the exact opposite of what we saw growing up. And so this all kind of just gets to be a belief system in our head. And then, like you said, the decisions we're making are just almost an automatic. Like, we have this belief and we have this idea. And so you present them with something, and the decision is actually, in a lot of cases, just like a knee-jerk yes or no based on these beliefs. So then, of course, you can explain things. And if you do understand them well enough, then, you can explain it in a way they'll hear it. But for most people, a lot of people are walking out without financial advisors too, or and so they're making their own decisions. So we did talk a little about parenting. And, you can see from this conversation, if so much of what you're bringing forward into your life is coming from your childhood, as a parent, what do you do to try to make sure your kids are having, developing some kind of a good relationship with money?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's about breaking the chain. And I think the first step in breaking the chain is recognizing that the chain was broken to begin with. And I'm the kind of person that has to change the things that they can't accept. And there were a lot of things that I couldn't accept growing up. And so I made it my business to make sure that I broke that chain. And there are a lot of people that I speak to that don't want their kids to, quote, suffer, because they suffered as a kid. So they don't want their kids to go through that. And my first thought is, well, how do you think you got the way you are? There's something called the blessing of a skinned knee. Mm-hmm. And you have to allow your children to make mistakes under your roof as much as you possibly can while you have them under your roof. Because when they're 18, all bets are off, legally.
Yeah.
So for my husband and I, it was very, very important to make sure. Now, we're both financial planners, so it was obviously very important for our children to be fiscally responsible. But for your listeners, I'll give an example of some of the things that we did. When my children were in high school, like sophomore, juniors, we said, we're going to take a family vacation, and we're going to give you the budget, and we want you to pick the place. We want you to pick the hotel, the activities. You're going to make all the reservations, everything soup to nuts. Now, what it did was it taught them how to work together. I'm sorry, the sun is coming into my, I apologize for the visual here.
No, you're okay. I know how that is. I have a skylight in my office.
I apologize.
No, it looks great.
But what we did was we gave them the budget. We said, you figure this out, and then present it to us. Present us 3 locations. So what it taught them to do was to communicate. Okay, it taught them how to work with a budget. It taught them how to negotiate with each other. It taught them how to communicate with each other, where they wanted to go, what their wishes were, if there was a conflict. It taught them to work it out. And that was really important for us, because when we're no longer around, they're going to be dealing with their own families and money. Yeah. And we want to make sure that they know how to communicate and they know how to talk about the money openly. So we talked about money at the dinner table all the time. And it took them like a month to put their presentation together. So when they did, let me tell you, it was the greatest vacation we have. It was the most memorable. We went to the most beautiful place. We went horseback riding. We went, hiking. The restaurants, the air, everything. And they were conscious of how much things cost. They worked deals out. So fast forward, now they're off my payroll, except of course for the Spotify, right? Okay. So I said, why am I paying for Spotify? And then my son said, well, if we can get a family plan, it would be cheaper for all of us. So I said, okay, fine, deal. So but he wouldn't have recognized that. Like he wouldn't have, I think it taught him the fundamentals of, the deal. Like there's a better way to do this. Let's do it together so that we can save money as a family, right? And so that was interesting to me that he said that very recently. But what I taught them was we also didn't tie allowance to grades or chores. That was an absolute no-no. Because in my house, in anyone's house, your children, that's their community. That's their first community where they start. And they need to learn how to live in that community. And when you're in a community, you have to pitch in, you have to help. It's expected, and you have to lend a hand. So laundry, dishes, everything, like it wasn't mom was going to do. It was do it yourself, take out the garbage. And it wasn't about the money. The money, an allowance, is to teach people how to spend, save, invest, and give away. That's what money's for. It's not to get good grades. If my kid got good grades, I said, you must be so proud of yourself. I'm so proud of you. I gave my child a hug. I gave my child love and respect. Because at the end of the day, people want to feel love, they want to feel understood, and they want to feel respected. It's not about the money. So I made it about that. And the money was, their relationship with money is really healthy because I didn't tie it into those emotions of love and respect and understanding.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
That's a great point. A really big deal. Yeah.
Big deal.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's not the usual. Usually it is, let's give you little jobs. So washing the dishes is $1 or whatever. But I love your take on it. I think that is so much smarter.
Yeah. I mean, like if you give someone money, if you give a child money, you have to teach them what to do with it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's okay to teach your child that if I get a good grade, I get money. I don't like that. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right to me. Others might disagree with me, but for me, it wasn't right. Money is, I've seen some people be directed by money only. And I think it's sad.
Yeah.
Because there's more to life than money. Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong. Money makes it easier, but it's not what life is about. Mm-hmm. It's not raising children. And if you're going to raise fiscally responsible children, maybe that's the way to break that chain of what was your relationship with money growing up with your parents.
Yeah.
That was kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, that was beautifully said and really, really interesting. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have the time, but boy, I could talk for another hour about the whole love, money connection and how that could translate down the road. You do something for me, that should be just something you do out of love, actually, or out of a sense of community. And when you get money for it, how does that shift the emotion around that experience?
I know.
You could get really philosophical on this one. Yeah.
Really fascinating.
It's fascinating. I find it fascinating. I'm glad you do.
I do. Yeah. And so back to your point with regard to the money, the conversation surrounding money with your clients, I assume that everyone grew up in a dysfunctional home. I have to assume it, unless they tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
It's really important to understand that.
Well, and there's some dysfunction, I think, in every home because nobody was talking about money. So I don't know how people learned about it. I mean, you just picked up from, your family, your church, the television set, your teachers, whatever, and you put together this whole narrative in your head around money, and then you pass that on. So if you're talking about money from the get-go and having conversations, I think it really stems from the taboo around speaking about it, that happened for a long time. So I think those conversations that you have with your kids are really important. And I think it's also, you two are money experts. If you're in a family where the parents are like, I don't know anything about money, and so I can't really talk to my kids about it, you can even have that conversation. They can get their information from other sources. But, anyway, this is a fun conversation. I'm glad
that you just said that, because it's so important for them to understand that you don't need to be professional to talk about money. You don't need to be a doctor to talk about health, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. We had dinner almost every night, and I don't think money is taboo, and I think it's really, really important to, at a young age, to be comfortable talking in front of your children about money. And that it does not buy happiness, and that it does not grow on trees. And those are the conversations we had when they were very little. And then as they matured, they will become much more mature conversations, right? And so it's all the age appropriateness of the conversation and the topic. You do not need to be a financial planner. You don't need to be a professional. You just need to be communicative. You need to be honest. You need to be authentic. You need to be an owner of your own, faults. And that's a big thing too. Being an owner of your own faults, that's big. Because then you're saying to your kid, this is not right, and I know it's not right, and I don't want you to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's really,
I didn't
really
mean to interrupt
important.
you there, but it was important. People need to have dinner with their kids more often.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's something that they can get their kids to say. Did you ever notice that when kids, when you ask them how their day was, how was school, how was work,
fine,
how was any of that stuff? Fine, it was fine, fine. I used to get them in the car, and I'd pick them up from school, and I'd say, tell me 2 things that happened today that are true and one that's not true. And I have to guess which one's not true. And we did it every day. Their friends got in the car. Oh, I want to go first. I want to go first. And that's how you get them talking.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Great tip. So, well, Abbe, I could talk to you for much more time if I had it. I'm really sad to actually let you go here, but I want you to let people know how to reach you, how to find you, if you are out there for people to learn from.
Thank you. I appreciate that. They can reach me. I think the quickest way to reach me is through email. It's alarge@lenoxadvisors.com. That's how you spell it on the screen there. You can also go to the Lenox Advisors website or send me a message on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. And I'll put all that in the show notes for people. Well, thank you so much. This was wonderful information, and I loved your stories, and I so appreciate you coming on today and spending time with us. Really meant a lot.
Thank you. And by the way, thank you for what you're doing, which is talking about money and having these conversations head on. It's awesome. And I really hope that you get more and more listeners from what you're doing. It's really great.
Thank
you.
So thank you. I really appreciate that. And listeners, we appreciate you. We love having you listen to the Money and You show. You can find us on all the podcast platforms, Roku, and the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. And we would especially love it if you would give us a review or a share or tell your friends about the show. That would be so valuable to us. And we can have more wonderful guests like Abbe on the show as we continue through this journey. So thank you so much. And we will see you next week.